Have you ever noticed that the more you try to hold on to a person, an opportunity, or something you deeply desire, the more distant it seems to become? As if life follows a quiet law. The more you cling from fear, the more unstable your inner energy becomes. You no longer move from peace, but from a feeling of loss. You no longer love from fullness, but from the fear of being left behind. And in the very moment you try to prove that you are worthy, you quietly forget the value that has always existed within you. Carl Jung saw that behind many intense pursuits, there is not only desire, but a part of the unconscious trying to speak. Perhaps you are not only chasing love, but searching for someone to fill an old loneliness. Perhaps you do not only need recognition, but are trying to heal the feeling of once being overlooked. And sometimes, what you call persistence is only the fear of not being chosen wearing a more beautiful name. Vibrational detachment, then, is not turning away from what you want. It is learning to stand firmly within yourself, without trading your peace, dignity, and true being just to receive a response from the outside. In this video, you will understand why, when you stop chasing, things begin to come to you. Not because you become colder, but because you become more whole. You will see the shadow behind your attachment, the persona that makes you lose yourself in order to be chosen, and the self quietly guiding you back to the deepest center within. Stay until the end, because what you are about to realize may not only be how to let go of what does not belong to you, but how to stand in the right place in your own life, where your magnetism no longer comes from trying to be loved, but from the quiet presence of someone who has truly returned to themselves. Number 1. When you stop chasing, your energy begins to return. There is a kind of exhaustion that does not come from the body, but from having been away from yourself for too long. You still wake up, still work, still talk, still smile as if everything is normal. But inside, a large part of you is being pulled somewhere else. A message that has not arrived, a gaze that remains unclear, an opportunity that has not opened, a person who has not chosen you. You live in the present, but your mind stands before the door of the future, endlessly knocking, endlessly waiting, endlessly asking whether what you desire will ever turn toward you. When you pursue something from a place of peace, it can become a beautiful journey. But when you pursue it from fear, it begins to turn into a quiet exchange. You trade calmness for a signal. You trade dignity for a reply. You trade presence in real life to run after a possibility that is still uncertain. From that moment on, your energy no longer lives in your breath, your work, or the things happening before your eyes. It is sent outward like invisible threads, tied to another person, to an outcome, to an image you believe will finally make you feel at peace. I once knew a friend named Sarah. She used to be full of life, gentle yet deep, someone who could make every conversation feel warmer. But when she entered an ambiguous relationship, Sarah slowly changed in a way that was hard to notice at first. She no longer listened to music because she loved the song, but because the lyrics matched the mood of the person she was thinking about. She no longer chose a dress because it made her feel beautiful, but because she wondered whether he would notice. Every time her phone lit up, her eyes changed immediately. Every time there was no message, her whole day seemed to lose its color. The saddest part was that the other person did not directly take Sarah's life away from her. Waiting, interpreting, and invisible attachment did that. She did not lose herself in one dramatic moment. She lost herself each time she placed her emotions in the hands of someone who might not know how to hold them gently. Carl Jung once wrote, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, there love is lacking. The one is the shadow of the other." There are times when we think we are loving, but in truth, we are trying to control. We want the other person to respond so we can feel reassured. We want a door to open so we can feel validated. We want life to move according to our expectations, because if it does not, something deep within us will feel abandoned, overlooked, and pushed out of safety. And right there, love, dreams, or ambition begin to lose their original clarity. They are no longer the natural flow of life, but a hand that grips too tightly. What makes human beings suffer is not always what they fail to obtain. Often, it is the way they attach their entire sense of worth to that thing that exhausts them. A person not replying is not only a person being silent. In a wounded mind, that silence can become proof that we are not important enough. An opportunity that has not arrived is not only a delay. It can become a voice saying we are not talented enough, not lucky enough, not worthy enough. When energy becomes trapped in pursuit, everything outside turns into a mirror that magnifies the fear within. From Jung's perspective, human beings are not only driven by what they know, but also by the unconscious parts they have not yet named. Sometimes, what you are chasing is not the real person standing before you, but the feeling of being chosen that you once lacked. Sometimes, what you long for is not simply success, but the wish to compensate for years of feeling small. So the more you chase, the more you think you are getting closer to what you want. But on a deeper level, you may be moving farther away from the place you were meant to return to, the calm center within yourself. Imagine your energy as the light of a lighthouse. When the lighthouse stands firmly on the cliff, its light can guide ships through the night sea. But if the lighthouse uproots itself and runs after each ship, it can no longer illuminate anything. It only becomes a drifting object in the waves. Human beings are the same. When you stand firmly within yourself, you carry a clear, calm, and magnetic presence. But when you run after every glance, every reply, every possibility of being chosen, you no longer radiate steadiness. You radiate pleading, and that pleading, even when unspoken, can still be felt very clearly. Stopping the chase does not mean extinguishing desire. It simply means not allowing that desire to become the king of your inner life. You can still love, but you do not turn love into begging. You can still hope, but you do not let hope become a chain. You can still move toward a goal, but you do not move from the panic that if you fail, you will become no one. This is the subtle difference between a person living with aspiration and a person being swallowed by aspiration. When you stop chasing, at first, nothing outside may change immediately. The other person may still be silent. The opportunity may still not appear. The result may still remain unclear. But inside you, another movement begins. You may breathe more deeply. You may do one thing without constantly checking your phone. You may pass through an afternoon without turning someone's absence into a sentence against your worth. The parts of you that were trapped in waiting begin to return to your body, to your rhythm, to the small things you once forgot. And when your energy returns, you begin to see more clearly. You realize that not everyone who makes your heart tremble is suitable for your path. Not every closed door is a loss. Not every delay is a sign that life is rejecting you. Sometimes, it is simply a gentle but profound reminder that you have given too much power to things outside yourself. You have stood for too long before someone else's door, while the house within you is waiting to be lit again. The most beautiful part of this journey is not whether the thing you want comes back or not. It is the moment you realize you do not need to abandon yourself in order for something else to stay. When you stop chasing, your energy begins to return like water finding its riverbed again, like breath finding its natural rhythm, like a room long closed finally opening to the light. From there, you no longer live like someone standing outside your own life waiting to be called. You become the quiet center of your own presence, and it is within that quietness that what is truly aligned with you finally has enough space to come closer. Number 2, the more you cling, the more you lose your magnetism. And when your energy begins to return, you will realize a very quiet truth. Magnetism is not born from trying to hold someone tightly, but from your ability to keep yourself when what you want may not belong to you. The more a person clings, controls, and needs reassurance, the heavier their presence becomes. At first, this may be called loving deeply, caring deeply, trying deeply. But over time, it begins to take the shape of fear. And when fear enters the place where love should live, natural attraction begins to withdraw. In literature, this image appears hauntingly through Miss Havisham in Charles Dickens's novel Great Expectations. She was once a bride abandoned right before her wedding, but instead of allowing the pain to pass through her like a dark season and then close, she froze her entire life at the moment of betrayal. The wedding dress remained on her body. The wedding cake stayed there, decaying with time. The clocks in the house were stopped at the exact second the wound happened. Her room was no longer a place to live, but a cold temple worshipping the past. Miss Havisham did not only cling to a man who had left, she clung to the feeling of betrayal, to the image of herself as a victim who would never be healed. And because she held on so tightly to that wound, everything inside her gradually lost its life. She did not raise Estella with free love, but with bitterness and the desire to take revenge on life. She turned a young girl into a tool to hurt men, as if by making others suffer, she could reclaim the power she had lost. But that is the tragic illusion of attachment. It makes us think we are becoming stronger, while in truth, we are only allowing the past to keep controlling every breath of the present. The magnetism of a person is always connected to the life still moving within them. Someone who is alive inside carries softness, curiosity, warmth, and the ability to open to what is new. But when someone clings to a wound, a person, an outcome, or an image that has already died, they begin to carry the atmosphere of a room without light. Others may feel compassion for them, may even be drawn to their tragedy for a while, but it is hard to remain long in a space where every emotion is pulled back into the past. Clinging does not only hold you back, it makes your presence lose its freshness. Carl Jung once wrote, "Projections change the world into the replica of one's own unknown face." When we cling too tightly to someone, it is very possible that we no longer see them as they truly are. We see the parts of ourselves that have not yet been understood. One person becomes a promise of healing. One relationship becomes proof that we are worthy of love. One recognition becomes a mirror that allows us to believe we are not invisible. And the more unaware we are of this, the more easily we confuse love with dependence, aspiration with hunger, what we truly need with what we are trying to possess. From a psychological perspective, clinging is not only wanting someone to stay. It is when your nervous system begins to see another person's presence as your only source of safety. When a message arrives, you soften. When silence stretches, you tense up. When a sentence sounds slightly cold, you immediately imagine that you are about to be abandoned. At that point, the other person is no longer just the other person. They become the switch that controls your inner state. And no one can maintain natural magnetism when all of their peace is placed in another person's hands like that. In a state of clinging, we often do not realize that we are becoming heavy. We think we are only caring, but in truth, we are checking. We think we are sacrificing, but deep down, we expect that sacrifice to be returned as commitment. We think we are loving deeply, but beneath it lies the fear that if we do not hold tightly, we will be replaced. Others may not fully understand what is happening inside us, but they can feel the pressure. They feel that every action they take can either lift us up or make us collapse. And when a relationship turns into a place where one person must constantly rescue the emotions of the other, the initial attraction slowly becomes fatigue. Clinging is like burning incense in a closed room. At first, the scent may feel enchanting. It is warm, deep, and intimate. But if you close every window and allow no air to move, that very fragrance becomes suffocating. Love is the same. Care is the same. Desire is the same. A beautiful thing can remain beautiful only when it has room to breathe. When you cover it with too many expectations, too much control, and too much need for response, it is no longer a fragrance. It becomes smoke. And the more you try to hold smoke in your hands, the more you only sting your own eyes. This does not mean you must become cold. Coldness is not freedom. Pretending not to need anyone is not magnetism. A deeper magnetism lies in being able to love while still having roots. You can desire without losing your calm. You can miss someone without turning longing into pursuit. A magnetic person is not someone who never hurts, but someone who does not use their pain to tie another person down. They can be sad, but still keep their dignity. They can be disappointed, but do not turn disappointment into begging. They can love sincerely, but their love does not carry the scent of fear. When you cling less, the first thing that changes is not that the world immediately runs toward you. The first thing that changes is your field of presence. The way you speak becomes less tense. The way you wait becomes less painful. The way you love becomes less like a negotiation. You no longer try to create presence through pressure. You simply are present. And that non-demanding presence carries a beautiful weight. It makes others feel they can come closer to you, not that they are being pulled in to fill you. What you need to do is simply relax in the exact place where you usually tighten the most. When you want to check, pause for a moment. When you want to send another message just to be reassured, return to one concrete thing in front of you. When you want to turn someone's silence into proof that you are not good enough, remember that emotions can feel very real, but they do not always tell the truth. Do not suffocate what you love just to make sure it belongs to you. Give it space to come, to stay, or to leave on its own. And more importantly, allow yourself to stop living in the posture of holding on. If this part touched you, comment, relax. Not as a beautiful phrase, but as a quiet reminder sent back to yourself. I do not need to use fear to hold on to what should come through freedom. I do not need to tighten my grip until I destroy the beauty of what I love. And I do not need to trade my peace just to make someone stay a little longer. Because true magnetism does not return when we try harder to become attractive. It returns when we no longer allow attachment to dim the dignity, gentleness, and depth that have always existed within us. Number 3. Excessive desire often hides a wound. The moment you cling less, a deeper question begins to appear. Why are there things we do not merely want, but almost desperately need to have? A normal desire usually carries a certain softness. It gives us direction, but it does not swallow us. It moves us forward, but it does not make us lose ourselves. Excessive desire is different. It carries the heat of an unhealed wound. It makes us feel that if we cannot have that person, that opportunity, that recognition, then not only has something outside disappeared, but something inside us seems to collapse as well. And it is precisely at this point that we need to pause. Because sometimes what we are chasing is not what we truly need, but the symbol of an old pain trying to return. A follower of the channel once left a comment sharing, "I used to think I only wanted my ex to come back. I prayed for it every day, checked their profile, imagined them texting me, and kept wondering what I had done wrong. But after some time, I realized that what hurt me most was not really losing that person. What hurt me was the feeling that I had been abandoned again. Just like when I was a child, when my parents often stayed silent whenever I needed to be heard." That comment was short, but it touched a deep truth. Many times the present does not hurt as much as we think it does. It hurts because it awakens an old room in the soul, where a child once waited to be seen, waited to be held, waited for someone to say that they had not been forgotten. That is why a small event can sometimes create a very large reaction. Someone replies to the message late, and we feel our heart drop. A rejection at work comes, and we feel as though our entire sense of worth has been denied. Someone does not choose us, and we are not only sad, but panicked, ashamed, empty, as if something very deep within us has just been touched. If we only look at the surface, we may blame ourselves for being weak, too sensitive, or too emotional. But under the light of Jung, those reactions are not meaningless. They are traces. They are fragments of a map leading back to the place where the original wound was buried. Carl Jung once wrote, "The psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside, as fate. Things within us, if not recognized, will find a way to appear in our outer life. An unnamed fear of abandonment can make us repeatedly fall in love with emotionally distant people. A feeling of not being good enough can make us addicted to achievement, addicted to praise, addicted to proving that we are worthy. A memory of being overlooked can make us so sensitive that any sign of indifference feels like a knife. When the wound has not been brought into the light, we often do not know whether we are choosing from the present or reacting from the past. Excessive desire is like thirst in the middle of the sea. There is water everywhere, but the more we drink, the thirstier we become, because that water does not truly nourish the body. A person may receive a great deal of attention and still feel lacking. They may achieve success and still feel empty. They may be loved and still fear being left behind. Because what they need is not merely another message, another achievement, or another person beside them. What they need is to recognize where that thirst began. If the wound lies in the feeling of not being loved, then a new relationship can only soothe it temporarily. It cannot meet the abandoned part of you on your behalf. If the wound lies in the feeling of having no value, then a round of applause is only a brief echo in a room that still remains cold. From a psychological perspective, excessive desire often carries a compulsive quality. You do not merely want it, you are pulled toward it. You know you should stop, but you still check. You know you should stay calm, but you still imagine. You know you should take care of your own life, but your mind keeps returning to one single point. This happens because the body has attached that thing to a sense of safety or self-worth. If they choose you, you feel okay. If success comes, you feel valuable. If someone recognizes you, you feel that you have a place. But when inner stability depends on something outside, you will always live in a state of waiting. And waiting in that way is not hope. It is a very subtle form of imprisonment. The most dangerous thing about excessive desire is that it can dress itself in beautiful names. We call it deep love, while it is quietly eroding our self-respect. We call it ambition, while it is hiding the fear of being looked down on. We call it loyalty, while it is only the fear of stepping out of what is familiar. We call it destiny, while sometimes it is only the repetition of an old pattern. Jung does not invite us to deny desire. He invites us to see through desire, because desire, when understood correctly, can become a doorway. But when left unilluminated, it becomes a maze. There are people who spend years pursuing a type of person who is always cold toward them. They say they enjoy mystery, challenge, and the feeling of having to win someone over. But if we listen more deeply, we may find beneath it a very sad belief. Love must be difficult in order to have value. If someone loves them easily, they become suspicious. If someone is stable, they feel bored. If someone is kind, they do not feel moved. Not because they truly do not need healthy love, but because their inner system has become used to having to struggle in order to be loved. The old wound makes instability feel familiar, while peace feels foreign. So when a desire becomes too intense, do not rush to believe that it is the call of fate. Sometimes it is the call of a part of you that has not yet been healed. What you need is not to blame yourself for wanting too much, nor to force yourself to become emotionless. What you need is enough tenderness not to deny that desire, and enough honesty to look behind it. If you cannot have this, which part of you hurts the most? If that person does not choose you, what are you believing about yourself? If that opportunity does not come, who are you afraid you will become? Those answers usually lead you somewhere much deeper than the object you are longing for. And the lesson here is not to stop desiring, nor to turn yourself into someone who no longer wants anything. The deeper lesson is to learn to listen to desire as a signal. When it takes away your peace, slow down and write down what you want most. Then complete this sentence. If I do not have this, I am afraid that. The rest of that sentence is often where the wound begins to reveal itself. And when the wound is seen, desire no longer has to scream in order to control you. It becomes a small lamp, shining toward the part of the soul that was once forgotten, where you no longer need to beg the world to heal you through recognition, love, or victory, but begin to return and give yourself what you have been searching for so long. Number 4, letting go is not losing, but reclaiming freedom. If excessive desire often hides a wound, what happens when you stop allowing that wound to decide how you hold on to life? This is where the concept of letting go begins to be understood correctly. Letting go is not turning your back on what you love. It is not convincing yourself that you no longer hurt, nor is it becoming cold in order to prove that you are strong. Letting go, at a deeper level, is the moment you stop allowing a person, a memory, an outcome, or a fear to become the only key that opens the door to your peace. It does not take love away from you. It gives you back the freedom you once mistakenly handed to something outside yourself. Many people fear letting go because they think letting go means losing. If they stop texting, the other person will forget them. If they stop trying, the opportunity will pass. If they stop controlling, everything will fall apart. But the truth is, there are things that will still hurt you no matter how tightly you hold them, if they do not belong to you in a healthy way. And there are things that, if they truly have a place in your life, do not need to be kept through panic. We often confuse love with possession, responsibility with control, persistence with imprisoning ourselves before a door that has already closed. But love does not mature in a prison. A soul also cannot grow if it must keep guarding something that has already exhausted it. In Sumerian mythology, there is the story of the goddess Inanna descending into the underworld. She was the goddess of love, beauty, power, and life. But to pass through the 7 gates of the world below, Inanna had to remove, one by one, the jewelry and symbols of power she wore: her crown, necklace, robe, and scepter. Each gate was a moment of losing something that had once defined her in the world above. When she reached the deepest place, she no longer had splendor, status, or the aura that once made others recognize her. She stood naked before the darkness, but that descent itself became a powerful image of transformation. To enter the true depth of being, human beings sometimes have to let go of the things that once made them feel safe. That story is not only an ancient myth, it is a psychological map of many lives. There are moments when you too must pass through gates like Inanna. At the first gate, you let go of the need to be chosen by someone. At the next gate, you let go of the image that you are always okay. Then you let go of the old story, that if someone leaves, it means you are not lovable. You let go of the role of being strong, while inside you are already exhausted. You let go even of the illusion that only when everything happens according to your will can you be at peace. Each time you let go, the ego feels as if it is losing a piece of its power. But deep beneath that, another part of you begins to breathe. Carl Jung once wrote, "We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses." Letting go begins with acceptance in this way. Not acceptance as surrendering to fate, but acceptance as stopping the fight against reality. You cannot be free from something you are still constantly cursing, resisting, denying, or trying to fix in your mind. The more you hate the past, the more space the past takes up in the present. The more you force yourself to forget someone, the more their image returns in another form. The more you blame yourself for hurting, the louder the pain must cry out in order to be heard. Acceptance does not make you weaker. It only stops turning you into a prisoner of the war within. From Jung's perspective, letting go is not an act of emptiness, but a step on the journey back to the self, the deeper center of the soul. The ego often wants everything to be clear, certain, and within reach. It wants to hold on to people, titles, images, and the stories it once believed. But the self does not guide human beings through control. It guides through events, losses, and moments that force us to ask again, who am I if I no longer have this? That question can hurt, but it also has the power to liberate. Because if you only know who you are when you are loved, recognized, or successful, then you do not truly know yourself yet. You only know the version of yourself that exists in the eyes of the world. Letting go is like removing a bracelet that has become too tight around your wrist. When you have worn it for too long, you begin to think that aching pressure is normal. You get used to the mark it leaves. You get used to the discomfort. You get used to every movement being slightly limited. Then, when you finally take it off, you do not feel freedom right away. At first, You only feel empty. Your wrist feels too light, too unfamiliar, as if something is missing. But after a while, the blood begins to circulate. The skin begins to warm again. You realize that what you thought was attachment had actually been silently tightening around you for months or years. Some relationships, expectations, and self-images are like that. You let go not because they never mattered. You let go because they no longer let you breathe. The hardest thing is that the mind often prefers familiar pain to unfamiliar freedom. An old sadness may make you suffer, but it is familiar. A person who is no longer right for you may exhaust you, but their name is still one you know by heart. A dream that was once beautiful may no longer be true, but leaving it behind means you must step into the unknown. And human beings fear the unknown. So we would rather stay in a dark room where we know the way around than open the door to a wide sky where we do not yet know how to live. But growth often begins exactly there, where you dare to choose freedom, even when freedom first makes you tremble. Letting go also does not mean denying the value of what has passed. Someone who once loved you can still have meaning, even if they no longer walk beside you. An opportunity that once made you feel alive can still be part of your journey, even if it is no longer your current path. An old version of you may have done everything it could to survive, even if you no longer need to keep carrying those defense mechanisms now. Mature letting go is not erasing everything. It is putting everything back in its proper place. The past remains in the past. Other people return to their own choices, and you return to the life that is waiting to be lived by you. When you let go in the right way, you do not become poorer. You reclaim space, and that space is precious. It is where intuition begins to speak more clearly. It is where the body no longer tightens around things it cannot control. It is where you begin to hear your true desires again, no longer mixed with the fear of loss. A heart filled with old things cannot recognize what is new. A hand that is always clenched cannot touch the life that is arriving. Sometimes what you call loss is only life removing from you a garment that has become too tight, so that the larger part of you can step out. What you need to do is simply choose one thing that is making your heart heavy, then loosen your hold on it through one small action today. No announcement is needed, no forcing yourself to forget, no proving that you are strong. Just do not check one more time. Do not send another message only because you are afraid of being forgotten. Do not lower yourself to keep something that is hurting you. Return to what is in front of you. Drink a glass of water, clean your room, walk for a few minutes, take a deep breath, and remind yourself that letting go is not losing. It is the way you stop placing your peace in the hands of something that no longer gives you freedom. Number 5. When you stop forcing, the natural flow opens. When you begin to understand that letting go is not losing, but reclaiming freedom, a very quiet shift happens inside you. You no longer want to force life to answer every insecurity immediately. Before, you may have thought that if you just tried a little harder, controlled a little more tightly, proved a little more, everything would move in the right direction. But there are things in life that do not open through pressure. There are relationships that, the more they are pushed, the more their fragility is revealed. There are opportunities that, when held too tightly, make us lose our clarity. And there are answers that only appear when there is enough stillness within us to hear them. In a Jungian sharing session, I once met a man in his 30s. His name was James Thomas. On the outside, James was the kind of person others could easily admire. A crisp shirt, measured words, a stable career, and eyes that always seemed to know what he was doing. But when the session moved deeper into things few people dare to say, he admitted, "I realized I had never truly lived. I was only trying to force everything to become proof that I was not a failure." James said that he always had a plan for everything. By what age he had to reach which position, how a relationship had to progress after a few months, how many tasks he had to complete in a day to be considered valuable. Even when resting, he felt as if he was doing something wrong. The strange thing was that the more he controlled, the more fragmented his life felt. He had more achievements, but less joy, more choices, but less freedom. He was always trying to push life forward like someone pulling hard on a stuck door, not knowing that the door actually opened in the opposite direction. In love, he wanted certainty too soon. At work, he wanted results to come quickly. When he met an obstacle, he immediately saw it as a sign that he was not good enough. Nothing was allowed to unfold naturally, because to James, natural meant losing control. And losing control in his inner world almost meant danger. Carl Jung once wrote, "Life has always seemed to me like a plant that lives on its rhizome. Its true life is invisible, hidden in the rhizome." This sentence evokes a beautiful image. Real life does not always lie in the part we can see. A tree does not grow because someone pulls its branches upward every day. It grows from the quiet roots beneath, from the darkness of the soil, from movements the naked eye cannot perceive. Human beings are the same. There are periods when, on the outside, nothing seems to have changed, but inside, something is quietly rearranging itself. An intuition is forming. A wound is softening. A new choice is ripening in silence. The problem is that the ego is often not patient enough with those roots. It wants to see results immediately above the ground. It wants flowers to bloom before the season has arrived. It wants the other person to answer before they have even understood their own heart. It wants the door to open before the self is mature enough to walk through it. And when things do not happen according to its will, the ego panics. It begins to force. It overanalyzes, overacts, overexplains, overproves. But the more we do this, the less we hear the subtle signals from within. We only hear the noise of impatience. From a scientific perspective, this is also easy to understand. When human beings fall into stress because they want to control an outcome, the nervous system often shifts into a state of alertness. The body tightens, the breath becomes shallower, and the mind clings to worst-case scenarios. At that moment, we think we are being clear-headed, but in truth, our ability to see broadly becomes narrowed. We react too quickly, misread signals, and make decisions only to escape temporary anxiety. Forcing does not make us wiser. It only makes us act from a state of threat. The natural flow does not mean sitting still and surrendering passively. This is where many people misunderstand. Stopping the force does not mean stopping action. It means acting from a calmer place within yourself. You still work, but you do not work as if your human worth is hanging on every result. You still love, but you do not love as if the other person is your only source of life. You still choose, still move, still take responsibility, but you do not turn everything into a battle with life. There is a great difference between effort that has roots and effort driven by panic. One helps you grow, the other drains you. Imagine you are standing before a river. If you try to push the water to flow faster with both hands, you only make the water splash up, soak yourself, and leave yourself exhausted. The river does not need you to command it in order to know its way. Your task is to understand its rhythm, choose the right boat, row at the right time, rest at the right time, and stay awake enough not to rush into the rocks. Life is the same. There are things that need your action, but there are also things that need you to stop interfering too much. They need you to step back so you can see the whole picture. They need you to allow a relationship to reveal its true nature. They need you to give an idea time to ripen. They need you to let yourself grow before receiving what you once wanted. It took James many years to understand this. He did not change by quitting his job, cutting off all goals, or becoming someone who lived without direction. He simply began to notice whenever he was forcing. When a woman did not reply immediately, instead of sending 3 more messages to pull certainty back toward himself, he stopped. When a project had not yet produced results, instead of seeing himself as a failure, he returned to the part of the work he could do that day. When he felt anxious, he did not immediately turn anxiety into action. He learned to let emotion move through his body before making a decision. And strangely, when he stopped trying so hard to pull everything toward himself, his life did not collapse. It began to find a rhythm. There are doors that only open when we no longer stand before them with clenched fists. There are answers that only appear when the mind stops forcing them to come at once. There are connections that only become real when we stop trying to direct other people's emotions. And there are parts of ourselves that can only be heard when the noise of control begins to quiet down. The natural flow is not an outer miracle. It is an inner state in which you no longer resist every movement of life. You no longer see every delay as failure, every silence as rejection, every uncertainty as a threat. What you need to keep is this: do your part, then allow the rest to have space to unfold. Today, instead of forcing an outcome, choose one clear and lighter action. Send a sincere message, then do not keep checking. Finish one part of your work, then do not punish yourself because it is not yet perfect. Give a relationship time to reveal itself, instead of forcing it to answer every fear inside you. When you stop pulling the river, you finally have enough stillness to realize where it is flowing. And sometimes, what you are searching for does not come because you tried harder, but because at last you became soft enough to stop standing in its way. Number 6. The shadow behind the fear of not being chosen. The moment a person stops forcing life to go according to their will, they often imagine that everything will immediately become lighter. But sometimes, it is precisely that stillness that reveals something deeper: the fear of not being chosen. When we are no longer busy controlling, no longer trying to pull answers toward ourselves, we begin to hear very quiet movements within the heart. A silence can make the heart sink. A compliment given to someone else can make us feel smaller. A delay can awaken the feeling that we have been pushed to the edge. And at that moment, what needs to be examined is no longer what the other person did, but which part of us has been hurt so deeply that it turns every signal into proof that we are not being chosen. James Thomas realized this not in a dramatic moment, but in a very ordinary situation after the Jungian sharing session. He said that one day he sent a message to the woman he was getting to know. The message was nothing special, only a simple check-in after a long day. She did not reply immediately. 1 hour passed, then 2. On the outside, James was still working, still opening his laptop, still answering emails. But inside, something began to tighten. He did not only think, maybe she is busy. He thought, maybe I said something wrong. Then very quickly that thought slipped into a darker layer. Maybe I am not interesting enough. Maybe she has lost interest. Maybe I am the one being left behind again. What startled James was not that she replied late. What startled him was the speed with which his mind turned a silence into a sentence against himself. In only a few hours, he had moved from waiting to doubting, from doubting to blaming himself, from blaming himself to quiet anger. One part of him wanted to send another message. Another part wanted to disappear so she would have to wonder. A colder part wanted to cut things off first, as if by leaving first, he would not have to endure the feeling of being rejected later. But in that very moment, James began to realize this was no longer a story of the present. This was an old darkness borrowing a small situation to step out. Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. We do not become free by only thinking about the beautiful things within us. We become free when we dare to look at what has been hidden: jealousy, hurt, the need to be chosen, the fear of being replaced, the anger of not being prioritized. The shadow is not always something evil. Often, it is simply the part of us that was too fragile and therefore was pushed into darkness because we did not want to admit that we needed love that much." From Jung's perspective, the shadow is made of the parts of ourselves that we do not want to claim as our own. A person who always takes pride in being strong may hide a deep fear of abandonment in the dark. A person who always says they do not need anyone may hide a longing to be held. A person who always appears generous may hide envy because others seem to be loved more easily. And the more we try to build a perfect image on the outside, the more the shadow finds ways to leak through small reactions. A sentence sharper than necessary, a silence used as punishment, an anxiety disproportionate to the situation, an urge to prove that we too are worthy of being chosen. For James, the shadow did not appear like a monster. It appeared like a child wearing adult clothes. A child who had once learned that, in order to receive attention, he had to be excellent, obedient, useful, and not cause trouble. He remembered many years earlier in his family, recognition rarely came simply because he was himself. It often came after achievement, after obedience, after the moments when he pleased others. Gradually, a quiet belief formed. If I am not outstanding, I will be forgotten. If I do not do well, I will be replaced. If I am not chosen, it must be because I am not enough. This is what makes the fear of not being chosen so painful. It does not only speak about a person in the present, it calls up an entire inner history. When someone replies late, the wound does not hear busyness, it hears abandonment. When someone chooses another person, the wound does not see their individual choice. It sees proof that we are less valuable. When an opportunity has not arrived, the wound does not understand timing. It only whispers, again, I am not needed. And if we do not realize that this voice belongs to the shadow, we will mistake it for the truth. The shadow is like an actor standing behind the stage, silently controlling the lights, the music, and the breathing of the entire play. The audience only sees the main character on stage, someone calm, rational, and mature. But behind the curtain, an invisible hand is pulling the strings. It dims the light when you feel ignored. It makes the music tense when someone else receives attention. It makes you say something cold when in truth you only want to be asked how you are. If you never turn back toward the backstage, you will keep believing that you are acting freely while the role has been written by the shadow for a long time. What James learned was not that he had to erase the fear of being chosen. He did not try to become someone who needed no love no recognition, no belonging. That would not be true, nor would it be human. He only learned not to let that fear speak on his behalf. When she replied late, he practiced pausing before acting. He named what was happening inside him. This is the fear of not being chosen. One short sentence like that created distance. He was no longer the anxiety. He was the one seeing the anxiety. And in that small distance, a very real kind of freedom began to appear. From then on, James noticed that his choices began to change. When he felt jealous, he did not immediately cover it with judgment. When he felt hurt, he did not turn it into punishing silence. When he wanted to prove himself, he asked whether he was doing this out of love for life or out of the fear of being seen as not enough. These changes were not loud, but they made him less pulled around by old reactions. He began to see that not being chosen in one moment did not mean his entire being had been rejected. One person failing to see his value did not mean that value did not exist, and an outer silence did not necessarily have to become an inner condemnation. The most subtle thing about facing the shadow is that we do not fight it, nor do we let it take control. We simply bring light into the place that was once forgotten. When you feel hurt because you are not prioritized, do not rush to call yourself weak. When you feel jealous because someone else is chosen, do not rush to cover it with a false nobility. When you want to leave first so you will not be hurt, recognize that perhaps this is a very old part of you trying to protect itself. Seeing this does not make you lower. It makes you more real, and a real human being always has more strength than a perfect image. If this part touched you, share in the comments with one very short sentence. I used to fear. You do not need to tell your whole story if you are not ready. Simply allow one small part of the shadow to be named. It may be, I used to fear being left behind. I used to fear not being good enough. Or simply, I used to fear not being chosen. When a fear is spoken with honesty, it no longer has to control you in silence. And perhaps your small story may become a light for someone else sitting somewhere, also believing that they are the only one carrying that fear in their heart. Number 7. Persona makes you lose yourself to be recognized. So what happens when the fear of not being chosen gradually becomes the habit of altering yourself in order to be accepted? At that point, human beings no longer only hide their wounds. They begin to create a version of themselves that is easier to love, easier to praise, easier to recognize. That version knows how to say the right amount of wise things, how to smile at the right moment, how to stay silent so no one feels disappointed, how to appear calm even when everything inside is shaking. Jung called this the persona, the social mask that helps us enter life. It is not wrong, it is even necessary. But a mask, no matter how beautiful, becomes dangerous when the person wearing it forgets their real face. In Oscar Wilde's novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, Dorian Gray is a young man whose beauty fascinates others. That beauty gives him admiration, power, and the feeling that he is special. When he realizes that his outer image can make the world look at him with desire, Dorian gradually gives his whole life to that image. He wishes that he could remain young and beautiful forever, while his portrait would age instead. And something strange happens. Dorian, in the eyes of everyone else, remains radiant, elegant, almost untouched by time. But in a locked room, the portrait becomes more and more distorted, carrying the marks of corruption, selfishness, cruelty, and inner decay. That story is not only about beauty or moral decline. It is about the price of living for too long inside an image that others admire. The more Dorian preserves his perfect appearance, the more he must hide the truth. The more he is seen as a symbol of beauty, the more he loses the ability to face the darkness within himself. The portrait in the locked room is like the part of the soul pushed out of the light, so the persona outside can continue to shine. But no one can divide themselves forever without paying a price. One day, what has been hidden will no longer agree to stay still. Carl Jung once wrote, "The persona is a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society. Fittingly enough, a kind of mask, designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other, to conceal the true nature of the individual. Persona, therefore, is a subtle agreement between the individual and society. We need it to work, communicate, maintain courtesy, and step into different roles. But when recognition comes only to the persona, we begin to mistakenly believe that our real self is not enough to be loved. We believe that if we remove the mask, others will be disappointed. If we are no longer strong, we will be seen as weak. If we are no longer capable, we will be overlooked. If we are no longer pleasant, we will no longer be needed. Modern life makes the persona more sophisticated than ever. We do not have a ghostly portrait like Dorian Gray, but we do have carefully edited versions of ourselves. A face that is always fine on social media, a voice that is always professional at work, a posture that is always understanding in love, an image that is always strong within the family. We learn to hide confusion behind productivity, loneliness behind busyness, wounds behind a few mature-sounding sentences. Over time, the inner question also changes. We no longer ask, "Is this true to me?" We only ask, "Will this make me look better?" This is where the persona begins to take life away from you. Not through one great collapse, but through very small acts of self-editing. You smile when you want to be silent. You agree when you want to refuse. You appear generous when in truth you are hurting. You take on more responsibility just to be seen as reliable. You hide your exhaustion because you fear disappointing others. You choose a path not because it calls your name, but because it makes your image look more successful. Each time, you think you are adapting. But if repeated for too long, adaptation becomes a quiet betrayal of your true being. Persona is like a sheet of colored glass placed in front of a lamp. Through it, your light can become softer, more beautiful, more suitable for the room you enter. But if that glass becomes too thick, others only see the color of the glass and can no longer touch the source of the light. And you yourself begin to forget what color your true light originally was. External recognition then becomes very strange. It makes you happy for a moment, but it does not nourish you for long, because what is praised is the glass. What is applauded is the image. And the real person, the part that had to remain silent so that image could exist, continues to starve. There are people who feel lonelier the more they are praised. Others say, "You are so strong," but all they want is a place where they are allowed to be soft. Others say, "You are so successful," but no one asks how much peace they had to trade to stand there. Others say, "You are so understanding," but no one knows how many true words they swallow so they would not disturb everything. Recognition like that does not reach the deepest place in them. It only touches the role. And a role, no matter how loved, can never replace the feeling of being seen as a whole human being. There are personas formed very early, from compliments that seem harmless. A child loved for being obedient learns to hide resistance. A child praised for being excellent learns to fear failure. A child recognized for being understanding grows into a person who does not dare to trouble anyone with their real needs. In childhood, that mask may help us stay safe, receive attention, and get a little love. But in adulthood, if we continue to live through that old mask, we will confuse acceptance with love, praise with intimacy, and an admired image with the feeling of truly being seen. And that is when the persona no longer protects us. It begins to live in our place. From Jung's perspective, the way back is not to destroy the persona, but to return it to its proper place. You do not need to throw away every social role. You do not need to live harshly or say everything in your heart to prove you are authentic. Authenticity is not a lack of refinement. Authenticity is not using refinement to bury yourself alive. You can still be kind, but you do not always have to be pleasant. You can still be professional, but you do not need to turn yourself into a machine. You can still be strong, but you do not need to deny your right to be tired. You can still be recognized, but you do not allow that recognition to decide whether you are allowed to be yourself. What you need to keep is this: no role is worth paying for with your entire being. Begin with one very small moment. A more honest answer, a gentler refusal, one time admitting that you are not okay without rushing to turn it into a joke. You do not need to remove every mask in one day. You only need to create a crack so the real person can breathe. When you no longer lose yourself in order to be recognized, recognition, if it comes, will no longer be the rope that pulls you away from yourself. It will only be the outer echo of a truth that is slowly learning to stand firmly within. Number 8. Vibrational detachment is standing firmly in fullness. However, when you no longer live through the persona in order to be recognized, another kind of quiet begins to form within you. You no longer need the outer world to prove that you are enough. This is where vibrational detachment is understood in its true nature. It is not acting cold. It is not using silence to manipulate, nor is it pretending not to need anyone so that someone will return. Vibrational detachment is when you can still desire, still love, still wait for something beautiful, but you do not allow anything outside yourself to determine your worth, your breath, or your inner peace. In real life, there are people who, after sending an important message, put the phone down, but their mind has not truly put it down. They go to work, but in their head, they are still waiting for the notification sound. They eat dinner, but a part of their emotion remains suspended on the other side of the screen. They are not only waiting for a reply, they are waiting for confirmation that they are still cared for, still have a place, still important enough to be answered. There are also people who enter a job interview with tension, not only because they want that job, but because if they are not chosen, they will feel as though all their effort and value have been denied. These things are very ordinary, but they reveal a profound truth. When the feeling of fullness is placed outside, human beings will always live as if they need someone else to fill them. Vibrational detachment does not tell you to stop wanting. A life with no desire is not necessarily an awakened life. It may simply be a life that has closed down. What needs to be transformed is not desire, but dependence on that desire. You can still hope that someone replies, but if they remain silent, you do not immediately turn that silence into a sentence against your dignity. You can still want an opportunity to open, but if it has not come yet, you do not see yourself as a failure. You can still love someone deeply, but you do not turn that love into the only place that proves you are worthy of love. That is the difference between a soul living in lack and a soul learning to stand in fullness. Carl Jung once wrote, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all in a certain sense insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. There are problems in the heart that cannot be solved by winning one more thing from the outside. The fear of not being enough will not disappear forever just because someone chooses you today. The feeling of emptiness will not truly be healed by a compliment. Anxiety will not dissolve permanently just because life temporarily goes according to your will. There are things we can only move beyond by becoming larger than them, by building an inner center wide enough not to be pulled away by every small change." From Jung's perspective, fullness is not the feeling of always being confident, joyful, or needing no one. That is a very common misunderstanding. True fullness is softer, deeper, and more human. It is the ability to stay connected to the self, the more whole center of the soul, even when the ego is anxious. The ego wants certainty. Will that person choose me? Will that opportunity come? Will others recognize me? But the self does not live by such immediate validation. The self reminds us that a human being is not merely an unanswered message, a rejection, a success, or a failure. You are a living process, far wider than what is happening today. Fullness can be imagined as an ancient well deep within the garden inside you. When you forget that well, you run everywhere, asking for small sips of water from other people's eyes, from praise, from attention, from being chosen, from new achievements. Each sip soothes you for a moment, but the thirst quickly returns. You need another reply, another sign, another success, another reassurance. But when you rediscover the well within, everything changes. You are still grateful for the water life gives you, but you no longer live like someone dying of thirst. You can receive love without turning the person you love into your only source of life. You can receive recognition without turning it into the final measure of yourself. That is why vibrational detachment has its own kind of magnetism. Not because you try to become mysterious or unpredictable, not because you withdraw so others will feel your absence, but because you no longer emit the signal of pleading. When people are near someone who is full within, they often feel light. They are not assigned the task of filling a void they did not create. They do not have to walk on eggshells to protect your emotions. They do not feel that each of their responses will decide whether you become happy or collapse. They can come close to you as free human beings, and it is that freedom that makes the connection become more real. But remember, fullness does not mean never needing anyone. A person who claims they need no love, no care, or no recognition at all is sometimes not free, but someone who has built another wall to protect themselves. True fullness does not close the heart. It simply refuses to sell the heart for the price of validation. It says, "I can love, but I do not use love to prove that I deserve to exist." It says, "I can desire, but I do not kneel before my desire." It says, "I can be sad when this does not come, but I will not abandon myself just because something outside has not chosen me." In daily life, vibrational detachment begins very small. When you want to check your phone for the 10th time, pause and bring your attention back to the body. Relax your shoulders. Take a slow breath. Do one concrete thing that needs your presence. When an opportunity has not responded yet, continue doing your part instead of using that silence to condemn yourself. When someone does not respond the way you hoped, allow the emotion to be present. but do not rush to turn it into a story that you are not good enough. Each time you do this, you are practicing standing in fullness, not through grand declarations, but by refusing to hand all your inner power to one outer signal. Thank you for accompanying me to this point in the journey. Before we continue, pause for 1 second and answer honestly. When was the last time you saw that full but forgotten version of yourself? Perhaps it was when you did not run after a reply. Perhaps it was when you chose to keep your dignity instead of trying to prove yourself. Perhaps it was a very quiet evening when what you wanted had not yet arrived, but you suddenly realized you were still whole. If you are brave enough, tell your story in the comments, not to impress anyone, but to listen to yourself speak the truth you have kept silent for so long. You are not as empty as fear once made you believe. You are only learning to return to the source of fullness that has always existed within you. Number 9. A calm soul always carries a hidden magnetism. And when you begin to stand firmly in fullness, calmness is no longer an appearance you have to create. It becomes the natural rhythm of someone who no longer allows every outer change to pull them away from their center. This is where hidden magnetism appears. Quiet, unshowy, yet unforgettable, because there are people who catch our attention because they are radiant. But there are also people we remember for a long time because they carry a rare silence, a steadiness that this noisy world rarely gives us. There is a kind of magnetism that does not come from words or appearance. It comes from the feeling a person carries when they walk into a room. They do not try to impress, do not seek to capture attention, and do not need to prove they are special. But there is a strange steadiness in them. Near them, we feel our hearts slow down a little. Not because they have no wounds, no sadness, no desire, but because they do not allow those things to turn them into a storm. They can feel deeply, but they do not make everything around them shake because of their emotions. They can be silent, but their silence is not cold. It is like a room with a low light, warm enough for others not to feel judged. In the Bible, there is a beautiful image, the story of Jesus sleeping on the boat in the middle of a storm. When the wind rose and the waves struck the boat, those with him were terrified because they thought they were about to sink. But Jesus was sleeping, not because he did not see the danger, not because he was indifferent to the storm, but because inside him there was a stillness greater than the storm outside. When he woke, he rebuked the wind and the sea, and the waves became calm. Whether viewed through faith or as an inner symbol, that image remains powerful. There are souls that do not need to control every wind, because they do not lose themselves when the sea becomes rough. That story can be seen as a symbol for the inner journey of human beings. The boat is the small ego moving through life. The storm is the unpredictable change we cannot foresee. A rejection, a silence, a failure, a love that does not happen as expected, a future that refuses to reveal itself. And the calmness, sleeping in the boat, is the deeper part within us, the part that still knows not every wave means we are about to sink. When we have not yet touched that part, we easily turn every event into fate. An unanswered message becomes a storm. A cold glance becomes a storm. A delay becomes proof that life is turning away from us. But when there is an inner center, we begin to understand that the storm may be real, but it is not the whole truth. Carl Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." True magnetism is the same. It is not only surface attraction between two images, but the meeting of two fields of presence. A calm person does not try to pull anyone toward them, but precisely because they do not pull, they create space for others to feel safe when coming closer. Others are not forced to play a role, not required to reassure, not pulled into a chaos they did not create. And for that reason, an encounter with a calm soul often leaves an echo far longer than a loud kind of charm. From Jung's perspective, calmness does not mean having no shadow, no desire, no unhealed parts. A calm person is not someone who has erased all inner conflict. They are someone who has learned not to fully identify with that conflict. When fear appears, they know it is a part of them, not the whole of them. When jealousy appears, they can see it without letting it lead them away. When desire rises, they do not immediately turn it into an order. It is this ability to observe the inner world that gives them depth. They are not a lake that has never known wind. They are a lake that has learned how to become clear again after being stirred. A calm soul is magnetic because it does not place the burden on others to complete it. When a person is constantly anxious, their love often comes with pressure. The other person must reply at the right time, care in the right amount, express themselves in the right way, or else the whole emotional world of that person will collapse. But a calm person loves with a wider presence. They still hope to be responded to, but they do not turn that response into the condition of their worth. They still want to be understood, but they do not fall apart when someone does not yet understand. They still have needs, but they do not use those needs to suffocate another person's freedom. And it is this spaciousness that makes them deeply attractive. A calm soul can be imagined as a lake high in the mountains. The lake does not need to call birds to fly toward it. It does not need to persuade clouds to reflect in it. It does not need to chase the moonlight. It only needs to be clear enough, still enough, deep enough. What is aligned will naturally reflect upon its surface. But if the lake is constantly disturbed, even the most beautiful sky becomes distorted when reflected there. Human beings are the same. When the inner world is too disturbed, we can turn an ordinary sentence into a wound, a silence into abandonment, a delay into condemnation. But when the soul becomes calmer, we see life with less distortion. And because we see more clearly, we also love more correctly, choose more correctly, and let go more correctly. True calmness does not lie in never being shaken, but in how you return after each shaking. It is like a candle protected by the palm of a hand in the wind. The flame still trembles, but it does not go out. A person with a calm soul is the same. They do not deny the waves within themselves, but they do not let each wave decide the direction of the whole ocean. This ability to return gives them a very quiet magnetism. Others feel drawn to them not because they are perfect, but because they have a place inside that is still enough for truth to be present without being judged. In them, calmness is not distance. It is a deeper kind of closeness, because it allows others to also be themselves without having to defend. The hidden magnetism of a calm soul lies in not needing to make noise in order to be recognized. When you are no longer constantly fighting with yourself, your words become clearer. When you no longer beg the world to validate you every minute, your silence gains depth. When you no longer react from every old wound, your presence becomes a place where others can breathe. You do not need to say much to be remembered. Sometimes it is your quietness that stays longest in another person's mind. Because the world has too many people who know how to impress. but not many people who make us feel peaceful when we are near them. What is worth keeping from this part is very simple. Practice becoming a place you yourself can return to when life becomes windy. When emotion rises, do not immediately chase it or push it away. Breathe slowly. Place your hand on your chest and name what is happening. I am worried, I am hurting, I am afraid. Simply naming it correctly already reduces the storm's power. A calm soul is not a soul that has never known storms. It is a soul that has learned, I am not the storm. And that awareness creates the deepest hidden magnetism, the magnetism of a person who has found a quiet sky within themselves and no longer needs to pull anyone into their life to cover the chaos. Number 10. What belongs to you does not need to be held by force. When the soul has learned to become calmer before the waves of the outside world, you begin to realize one thing. What truly belongs to you does not need to be held by fear. It may need care, sincerity, and presence, but it does not need you to shrink yourself, lower yourself, or trade your peace in order to keep it there. Because what only exists when you constantly beg, prove, or turn yourself into a smaller version of who you are is often no longer a place that nourishes you. It is only touching the hidden part within you that still believes if you let go, you will have nothing left. In a Jungian-oriented therapy session, I once met a woman named Mia. She shared, I used to think that if I was good enough, patient enough, understanding enough, he would stay. I did not dare to say what I needed, because I was afraid he would think I was too much. I did not dare to be angry, because I was afraid he would leave. I did not dare to be sad for too long, because I was afraid he would get tired. I kept thinking I was holding on to love, but in the end, I realized I was only holding on to a version of myself that could no longer breathe. Her words made the room fall silent. Because this was not only the story of one relationship, it was the image of so many people who once called endurance love, called silence maturity, and called losing their own voice keeping the peace. What awakened Mia was not a great event, but a very ordinary evening. She sat in front of her phone screen, wrote a long message, then deleted it again, because she was afraid that even one honest sentence could make the other person move farther away. And in that moment, she realized she was no longer communicating in love. She was negotiating with fear. She no longer asked, "Is this hurting me?" She only asked, "How do I make sure they do not leave?" When love turns into a room where you must walk very softly so nothing breaks, perhaps the most fragile thing is not the relationship, but your own presence within it. There are things in life that need to be nurtured, but should not be forced. A healthy relationship may go through misunderstandings, differences, even difficult seasons, but it does not require you to disappear in order to keep everything peaceful. A suitable job may challenge you, but it does not make you sacrifice your entire life force just to prove you are worthy. A true friendship may have distance, may have silence at times, but it does not make you constantly fear that if you become a little more honest, everything will fall apart. What belongs to you is not always easy, but it will not ask you to trade your true being for permission to stay. Carl Jung once wrote, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. There are choices that look beautiful in the eyes of society, but make your soul ache like a shoe that does not fit. There are relationships that make outsiders think you are lucky, while inside you must always walk softly, speak gently, and hide parts of yourself away. There are opportunities that sound dreamlike, but each day you live inside them pulls you farther from your true calling. A shoe that does not fit, no matter how expensive, if you keep forcing yourself to wear it, you will eventually forget what it feels like to walk naturally. From Jung's perspective, what belongs to you is not merely what the ego likes, but what aligns with the soul's process of growth. The ego may want a person because that person makes it feel chosen. It may want a title because that title makes it feel safe. It may want success because that success helps it avoid the feeling of being small. But the self, the deeper center within us, recognizes through another language. It does not only care whether you obtain that thing or not. It cares about who you become while living inside it. Do you become more honest, more spacious, more peaceful? Or do you become anxious, dependent, always watching carefully so you will not lose it? Sometimes we call something ours only because we have invested too much pain into it. We have waited too long, cried too much, tried too hard, so we do not want to believe that it may not be the place meant for us. The human mind finds it very difficult to let go of something that has taken years from us, because letting go means facing a bitter feeling. If it was not this, then what was all my suffering for? But something not staying forever does not mean it was meaningless. There are things that come to awaken you, not to belong to you. There are people who appear to show you which part of yourself needs healing, not to become your home. What belongs to you is like a door that opens in the right direction. You still need to walk toward it. You still need to place your hand on the handle. You still need the courage to step through, but you do not need to smash, claw, or make yourself bleed just to force it open. The doors that are not yours often exhaust you before you even enter. The more you pull, the more they jam. The more you try to prove yourself, the more they make you feel lacking. The more you lower yourself, the more they ask you to become even smaller. And one day, you will realize the problem was not that you were not strong enough to open that door. Perhaps it simply was not your door. In love, the right person is not someone who is always perfect for you. No one is perfect. But the right person will not make you live in a constant state of doubting your own worth. They may have limits, wounds, and difficult days, but their presence will not turn you into someone always begging to be chosen. And someone who does not have the capacity to meet you with sincerity, no matter how much more understanding or self-sacrificing you become, still cannot give you what they do not have within themselves. At that point, holding on does not make love grow. It only prolongs a negotiation with absence. In work, what belongs to you is not necessarily the easiest path either, but it has a very different quality. It helps you grow without making you disappear. It challenges you, but does not erode your dignity. It requires discipline, but does not force you to completely cut yourself off from your body, your emotions, and what truly matters. If a place only keeps you through the fear of being replaced, the fear of losing status, the fear of disappointing others, the fear that you will become no one, then perhaps you do not truly belong there. You are only tied to the image that place gives you. When you stop holding on by force, you do not immediately know what will stay. Some people may leave. A few doors may close. Some illusions may dissolve. But what remains after you no longer betray yourself to keep it, that is what deserves to be looked at closely. A relationship that remains when you speak more truthfully. An opportunity that stays open when you do not lose your dignity. A path that still calls you even when you no longer chase it in panic. These things carry the quality of alignment. They may help you mature, but they do not require you to disappear. Today, begin with one very small action. Stop at the place where you have become too tired. Do not send one more word just to soothe your fear. Do not explain again to someone who does not want to understand. Do not turn someone's silence into a reason to doubt your worth. Let what needs to stay remain by choice, because what is truly meant for you may need time, but it will not ask you to leave yourself in order to enter it. Number 11. When the ego stops controlling, the self begins to guide. From there, when Mia no longer tried to hold on to what had made her so tired, she began to enter a very different state, not more certain, but more real. Before, she always believed that if she was skillful enough, gentle enough, patient enough, able enough to anticipate the other person's emotions, then everything would not fall apart. She tried to control how she spoke, how she stayed silent, how she felt sad, even how she needed to be loved. But the more she tried to arrange every detail to protect a fragile outcome, the less she could hear the deeper voice inside. There was a very small voice that had been drowned out by anxiety for too long. It did not tell her to hold on. It only quietly reminded her that there are paths that keep other people, but make us leave ourselves. The ego, in Jung's understanding, is the part that helps us move through daily life. It gives us the sense of who I am, helps us choose, work, communicate, protect ourselves, and build an ordered life. But the ego also has a very clear limit. It fears what it cannot control. It wants to know for certain whether the other person will stay, whether the future will be safe, whether today's effort will be rewarded, whether this pain can be avoided. When driven by fear, the ego easily confuses control with peace. It thinks that if it holds everything tightly enough, we will not be hurt. But there are wounds that do not come because we let go. They come because we have lived too long in a state of tightening. After that therapy session, the hardest thing for Mia was not changing an outer action. The hardest thing was remaining still within uncertainty. Before, whenever she felt anxious, she would immediately do something to pull back a sense of safety. Explain more, apologize first, ask again, soften the situation, adjust her tone, try to make the other person comfortable. But this time, she tried to pause, not to punish anyone, not to appear strong, simply to stop long enough to see what was really happening inside her. And in that silence, she realized she had spent too many years asking, "How do I keep everything from leaving?" while forgetting to ask, "What within me needs to come home?" Carl Jung once wrote, "The ego stands to the self as the moved to the mover, or as object to subject." This sentence shows that the ego is not the final center of the entire soul. It is the conscious part, the moving part, the part that sees only a short stretch of the road ahead. The self is the wider center, containing both consciousness and the unconscious, both what we know about ourselves and what has not yet been recognized. The self does not only care whether we get what we want in front of us. It cares about wholeness. It cares whether we are becoming more real, deeper, more complete through what we experience. And so, there are things the ego calls loss, while the self may be using them to free us from a role that has become too tight. This does not mean human beings should leave everything to fate. When the ego stops controlling, it does not mean we stop acting. It means we stop acting from panic. We still say what needs to be said, but not to manipulate the outcome. We still choose what needs to be chosen, but not merely to avoid loneliness. We still walk forward, but not as if our entire worth depends on whether one door opens or not. The difference lies in the energy behind the action. An action that comes from fear is often rushed, tense, and needs immediate assurance. An action that comes from the self may still hurt, may still be difficult, but within it there is a very quiet honesty. Imagine the ego as someone holding a flashlight while walking through a forest at night. The flashlight is necessary. It illuminates a few steps ahead, helps us avoid stumbling, recognize the nearest path, and see the stones beneath our feet. But if the person holding the flashlight believes that only what the light touches is the entire forest, they will panic at every darkness around them. The self is like the night sky above that forest. It does not only see a few footsteps, but also the direction of the wind, the path of the stream, the position of the stars, the rhythm of the seasons. The ego helps us live in each moment, but the self reminds us that life is not only the few steps in front of us. For Mia, the guidance of the self did not come as a clear command. It came through very small signs she had previously ignored. Her body felt lighter every time she spoke the truth. Her chest tightened every time she was about to apologize for something that was not her fault. She slept more deeply on the days she did not try to guess the other person's mood. She felt more alive when she returned to the things she had once forgotten. A proper meal, a book read slowly, a conversation that required no performance, an afternoon walk without carrying fear in every step. These things were not dramatic, but they carried a very clear quality. They brought her closer to life. And sometimes, the self does not guide us through thunder. It guides us through the feeling of where we expand and where we contract. When the ego still holds control too tightly, it often only knows how to ask, "How can I get what I want?" But when the self begins to be heard, the question changes. Who is this trying to lead me to become? That question does not make pain disappear immediately, but it gives pain more meaning. A rejection is no longer only proof that you are not good enough. It may be an invitation to look at where you are still asking permission to exist. A broken relationship is no longer only a failure. It may be a door leading you back to the part of yourself you had forgotten. An emptiness is no longer only a loss. It may be the place where life is preparing a new form of you to be born. When the ego stops controlling, life does not instantly become easy, but it becomes more real. You no longer have to force everyone to play the right role in your script. You no longer have to turn every silence into an investigation. You no longer have to constantly edit yourself to hold on to an outcome that has exhausted you. You begin to sense another current of guidance, quieter, but more enduring. It does not promise that you will always get what you want. It only brings you closer to who you truly are. And sometimes that is the deepest protection. Not that life gives in to every desire, but that you are pulled away from the desires that are leading you farther from your being. So before an action that comes from fear, slow down for one moment. Before texting more, explaining more, apologizing more, checking more, listen to the inner quality of that urge. Is it making you clearer or making you shrink? Does it come from truth or from the fear of losing control? You do not need to see the whole path immediately. You only need to choose one small step that does not betray the deepest feeling within you. When the ego loosens its grip, the self does not need to speak loudly. It only needs a silence deep enough for you to realize. The right path is not always the path that is easiest to control, but the path that helps you return to the most truthful version of yourself. Number 12. You attract what is right when you do not betray yourself. If the self begins to guide when the ego stops controlling, then the next step of the journey is learning not to betray yourself along that path. Because you do not only attract through what you say, what you do, or the image you try to create. You also attract through the degree of honesty with which you are living in relation to your own soul. When you constantly ignore your true feelings, swallow your true voice, choose what does not fit just to be accepted, your inner energy begins to move away from its center. And when a person lives out of alignment with themselves, they often draw in things that are also misaligned, relationships that make them perform, opportunities that make them strain, recognition that makes them feel even more unfamiliar to themselves. During a coffee meeting with Justin, a friend who worked in the marketing department of a technology company in San Jose, California, I remember him saying something very thought-provoking. I have a life that, from the outside, seems to give me nothing to complain about. But more and more, I feel as if I am signing my name under a contract that is not mine. Justin was the kind of person who was easy to like at work. He knew how to speak at the right time, how to soften the atmosphere in tense meetings, how to take on more work without complaining. His colleagues saw him as reliable. His managers saw him as someone they could trust with responsibility. But after many years of living this way, Justin began to feel something inside him drying up. Not because he hated his job, but because he had become used to betraying the small signals within himself in order to preserve the image of the one who is always fine. He said there were campaigns he did not truly believe were moving in the right direction, but he still nodded because he did not want to be seen as difficult. There were weekends when he badly needed rest, but he still opened his laptop to work more because he feared others would think he lacked passion. There were times when he wanted to say, "I disagree," but in the end, he chose a safer sentence. That makes sense. Each time, no disaster happened on the outside. No one blamed him. No one saw him disappear. But inside, a small part of him stepped back. And after stepping back many times, Justin realized he was living inside a success that pleased others, while he himself was becoming less and less present. Carl Jung once wrote, "As far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being." The light Jung spoke of is not only outer knowledge, but the light of consciousness being lit within one's own life. Each time you are honest with what you feel, that light grows a little stronger. Each time you realize you are saying yes, while your whole body wants to say no, that light shines into a place that was once forgotten. And each time you choose not to betray yourself, you are not only protecting your self-respect, you are creating a new order within where more suitable things can recognize you. Justin did not change his life through a dramatic decision. He did not immediately quit his job, disappear, or announce to the whole company that he had been living wrong. The first thing he did was simply speak more truthfully in a small meeting. When an idea was presented and everyone seemed almost ready to agree, he felt the familiar contraction in his chest. Before, he would have stayed silent. That time, he said, "I think this direction carries some risk, and I want us to look more closely before we finalize it." The room went silent for a few seconds. His heart beat hard, but what he feared did not happen. No one hated him for saying it. On the contrary, a colleague later sent him a private message. "I thought the same thing, I just did not know how to say it." One true voice called out another true voice. From then on, Justin began to notice something very different. When he betrayed himself less, the people who were not aligned found him harder to use, but the people who were aligned found him more trustworthy. The managers who only wanted someone who always nodded began to seek him out less. But those who needed honesty, depth, and real responsibility wanted to work with him more. He no longer attracted the same kind of old pressure because he no longer emitted the same old signal. The change was not loud, but it was clear. When he stopped living like someone always asking permission to be accepted, he began to meet places that did not require him to shrink in order to enter. You can imagine this like a violin. Each string only creates a beautiful sound when it is tightened according to its own proper tension. If the string keeps being twisted to match the tension of another instrument, it may make sound for a while, but that sound will become distorted, harsh, or eventually cause the string to snap. Human beings are the same. When you try to live according to someone else's rhythm, someone else's desire, someone else's standard, you may still function, still be praised, still appear successful, but your deepest sound is no longer clear, and what is right for you often does not come to a distorted sound. It recognizes you most clearly when you dare to return to your true frequency. Not betraying yourself does not mean always following your emotions, nor does it mean being selfish, stubborn, or refusing to adjust for others. Maturity always requires the ability to listen, compromise, and take responsibility. But there is a very important boundary between compromise and self-abandonment. Compromise allows two people to meet without either one disappearing. Self-abandonment is when you constantly cut away your needs, feelings, values, and voice just to keep a place in someone else's life. Compromise makes love or work more spacious. Self-abandonment makes you smaller. When you do not betray yourself, you may lose a few old forms of recognition. Some people will find you different. Some places will no longer be able to use you as easily as before. Some relationships will reveal that they only existed when you stayed silent about what you truly needed. But that is not failure. It is purification. What only loved the shrunken version of you will gradually move away from the center, and the space they leave behind is not there to punish you, but to allow more aligned things to enter. What is right does not always arrive quickly, but it often arrives more clearly when you no longer distort your own signal through pretending. Tomorrow morning after waking up, what you need to do is choose one small moment to be more honest with yourself. You do not need to change your whole life. You do not need to make a huge decision. Just begin with something very close. Say, "Let me think about it more," instead of rushing to agree. Keep a pause instead of jumping into proving yourself. Choose an outfit because you feel like yourself in it. Write down something you truly want, instead of what you think others want to hear. A small action like that may not change the world immediately, but it realigns the direction within you. And when you live with less self-betrayal, what fits you has a chance to recognize you more clearly, not because you are trying to attract it, but because at last you have returned to the true sound of yourself. Number 13. Love comes closer when you no longer beg. And when you begin to live with less self-betrayal, love is also seen through different eyes. It is no longer a reward that must be earned through obedience, sacrifice, or endurance. It is no longer the only proof that you have value. It returns to its true nature. A free meeting between two people who are still real enough to be present before each other. Before, perhaps you believed you had to try a little harder to be loved. Softer, better, more attractive, less wounded, less in need of being heard. But love cannot touch you in the place where you are disappearing. it can only come close to the place where you still remain with yourself. There are people who enter love with a very quiet fear, the fear that they are not enough for someone to choose them fully. They do not say this directly. They only show it through very small things in daily life. They reply to messages very quickly, even when they are exhausted. They agree to meet, even when their heart needs rest. They laugh things off when they are hurt, then blame themselves for being too sensitive. They try to become someone who creates no pressure, has no needs, and makes no one feel burdened. From the outside, they may seem very loving, but deep inside, they are asking for love by making themselves as easy to love as possible. That begging is not always found in words. Sometimes it lies in eyes that are always waiting to be reassured, in the habit of reading every small change to guess whether they still matter or not, in accepting a few crumbs of care and calling that enough, in prolonged silence because they fear that if they speak honestly, the other person will leave. But love held together by fear never truly gives us rest. It is like sitting in a room where we are always afraid of being asked to leave. We are still there, still trying to smile, still trying to appear normal, but deep inside, there is nowhere to rest. From Jung's perspective, when we beg for love, we are often not only searching for a person, we are searching for an inner image that can save us from the feeling of not being enough. A person can be turned into a symbol of recognition, of self-worth, of the hope that finally we will be chosen. At that point, the other person is no longer seen as a whole human being, with limits, darkness, and their own freedom. They become a screen onto which we project the lacking parts of ourselves. We do not only love them, we love the feeling we imagine we will have when they love us back. And it is this projection that makes love heavy, because no one can bear the task of becoming proof of another person's worth of existence. Carl Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." In love, it is not only irritation that can open the way to self-understanding, but intense longing as well. What we cling to in another person often leads us back to a part of ourselves that has not yet been understood. If someone's coldness makes us collapse, perhaps there is still a very old place within us that believes we must be chosen in order to be lovable. If silence makes us panic, perhaps it is not only the present, but an old wound borrowing the present to speak. Love, in Jungian depth, is not only a matter between two people. It is also a mirror reflecting the inner parts we once forgot. Love comes closer when you no longer beg, not because you become colder or harder to reach, but because you no longer place another person in the role of saving you from yourself. There is a great difference between opening your heart and lowering yourself. Opening your heart means allowing another person to see your real self, including your softness, desires, fears, and capacity to love. Lowering yourself means hiding that truth in order to become the least troublesome version of yourself. Opening creates intimacy. Lowering creates dependence. The opening says, "I am here," truthful. Lowering says, "Please do not leave. I will become anyone you want." Imagine love as a wind chime hanging before the porch. When the wind comes naturally, it rings clearly, lightly yet deeply. But if you keep standing there shaking it with your hand, because you are afraid it will fall silent, the sound is no longer the echo of the wind. It becomes noise created by anxiety. Love is the same. It needs space to move on its own. It needs silence so the other person can step forward freely. It needs willingness so emotion can grow. When you beg, check, plead, and force yourself to become someone with no needs, you do not make love ring more beautifully. You only turn it into a tense sound where both people can no longer hear the true rhythm of their hearts. There is a very quiet kind of maturity in love, knowing how to stand still when your heart wants to chase, not standing still to punish anyone, and not to play the role of being strong, but standing still so you do not hand the power to decide your worth to someone who may not know how to cherish it. When someone does not reply, you do not immediately turn that silence into a sentence against yourself. When someone does not choose you, you do not rush to conclude that you are unworthy of love. When a relationship cannot continue, you do not see it as proof that you have failed. You simply recognize that real love cannot be pulled out of a place that has no capacity to give it. When you no longer beg for love, you begin to see the other person more clearly. Before, fear only let you see the possibility that they might leave. Now, calmness helps you see whether they are truly present or not, whether they only speak or also act, whether they make you feel respected or only addicted to rare moments of care, whether they meet you with sincerity or appear just enough to keep you circling around them. When you are no longer too afraid of losing, you begin to distinguish between love and dependence, decorated with sweet moments. If this part touches some corner of you, share this video with someone who once confused begging with loving, who once thought they had to become smaller in order to be kept, or who once forgot that their heart also deserves peace. Perhaps they do not need another grand piece of advice. Perhaps they only need a gentle reminder that real love does not ask us to stand outside someone else's door begging for a place. It recognizes us more clearly when we are still standing firmly within ourselves. So when your heart begins to lean towards someone so much that you forget you also need to be cherished, slow down. Place your hand on your chest. Breathe deeply and remind your body that you do not need to disappear in order to have a place in someone's heart. Speak the truth when the truth needs to be spoken. Stay silent when words are only a way to hide fear. Step closer when there is willingness from both sides, and step back when your presence is only accepted in its smallest version. Because love comes closest not when you try to prove that you are worthy, but when you stop abandoning yourself so someone else will stay. Number 14. Everything comes to you when you live from your true being. At this point, when love is no longer something you must beg for, the entire journey begins to return to a deeper point, living from your true being. This is not about becoming perfect, nor about creating an image of authenticity for others to admire. Living from your true being is when your words, choices, way of loving, way of working, and the way you step into life no longer go against the deepest part of yourself. You no longer spend your whole life trying to become the version that is easiest to accept. You also no longer force yourself onto paths simply because they make others feel reassured about you. And when a person returns to the right place within, what is aligned begins to recognize them more clearly. There is a great difference between trying to attract and truly being present. A person who tries to attract often looks outward first, then adjusts themselves according to the gaze of the world. They measure every word, hide every feeling, choose every image so they will not be rejected. They think they are becoming more attractive, but the more they edit themselves, the farther they move from their original voice. A person who lives from their true being, however, does not necessarily stand out immediately. They may be quieter, less performative, not trying to seize attention, but there is a consistency in them that is very hard to fake. What they say and what they live are no longer too far apart. Their presence does not carry the feeling of lack, and it is that return that creates a magnetism that is not loud, but deeply enduring. In American cinema, Greta Gerwig is a noteworthy example. What makes her different is not only the success the public can see, but the way she brings a very distinct inner world into film. In Lady Bird, viewers are not drawn in by a perfect character or by a story polished so much that it becomes distant from real life. What touches them are the deeply human contradictions of youth, family, femininity, and the longing to be oneself. A girl who both loves her mother and wants to escape her mother, who longs to leave her hometown, yet is held by that very place in memory, who wants to become special, yet hurts from feeling too ordinary. These things are not loud, but they are alive, because they come from a place very close to human truth. The point worth reflecting on is not that everyone needs to become an artist or create a great work. The deeper point is that when a person dares to move closer to their true voice, they begin to create a different field of presence. Greta Gerwig is not compelling because she tries to become everything to everyone. She is compelling because her work has its own rhythm, its own pain, its own way of observing, and it is precisely that uniqueness that touches something universal. This is the paradox of true being. The more we try to please everyone, the more easily we become blurred. But when we are brave enough to step deeply into what is most truthful within us, the people who need to meet that truth will recognize it. Carl Jung once wrote, "My life is a story of the self-realization of the unconscious. Life is not only a sequence of goals to achieve, roles to fulfill, or images to protect. Life is also the process through which the unknown parts within us gradually step into the light. True being is not a fixed result, as if one day we find it and never become lost again. It is an unfolding process. Each time you look directly at the shadow, loosen the persona, listen to the self, speak a truth, or leave something that makes you smaller, you are allowing a deeper part of the soul to participate in life. You no longer live only through the ego that wants safety. You begin to live through the entire depth that you want to become. Living from your true being does not mean everything immediately becomes easy. Sometimes, it makes certain things leave more quickly. People who are only used to your agreeable version may find you unfamiliar. Environments that only love obedience may no longer find you convenient. Opportunities that once fed the ego through reputation, status, or admiration may lose their old appeal. But that departure is not always a loss. Sometimes it is a rearrangement. When you live falsely to yourself, you may keep many things on the outside, but inside, you lose your center. When you live more truthfully, perhaps a few things no longer stay, but what remains begins to carry real weight. Imagine true being as an underground spring deep beneath the earth. On the surface, people may cover it with many layers of concrete made of expectations, roles, fear, and the need for recognition. The ground may look clean, flat, and easy to control. But underneath, the water is still quietly seeking a way through. If those layers become too thick, the water does not disappear, it is only blocked. And when water is blocked for too long, the earth begins to dry. Grass cannot grow, living things become tired. But when you begin to remove the layers that do not belong to you, even a very small crack is enough for the water to rise. From there, life no longer needs to be forced. The soil softens by itself. Plants find their own way to grow. What needs water will know how to come. That is the deeper meaning of everything coming to you when you live from your true being. It does not mean that every desire of the ego will be fulfilled. It does not mean everyone you love will love you back, every opportunity you want will open, or every road will become smooth. What comes here is what is aligned with your real self. A relationship that does not make you perform. A job that helps you grow without draining your soul. An opportunity that needs your true voice, not a copy of someone else's. A rhythm of life that makes you feel present in your own existence. When you live truthfully, life no longer has to pass through too many layers of pretending to find you. You become easier to recognize by the things meant for the truest version of yourself. And this is also where the whole journey returns to a very simple point. When you stop chasing, you do not abandon desire. When you let go of control, you do not stop acting. When you no longer beg for love, you do not close your heart. All of these things only bring you back to the right place within yourself. From that place, you still love, still work, still dream, still move forward. But you no longer move forward like a lacking person trying to beg life for validation. You move forward as someone living from their own source. And that source carries a magnetism of its own, not loud, not forced, but steady, like a spring that knows its way to the sea. So when life pulls you away from yourself through a choice that looks safe, a role that is easy to love, or a path that seems right in the eyes of others, slow down for one moment. Keep one breath before saying something untrue. Listen to the part within you that still knows what is life and what is merely peace bought through self-betrayal. You do not need to change your whole life at once. You only need one small choice that does not go against your true being. A more honest sentence, a soft but clear refusal, one return to something that once made your eyes light up. Because everything that truly belongs to you does not come to the version of you that is trying to become someone else. It comes when you are brave enough to return and let life recognize the original light you no longer hide. In the end, when you stop chasing, the first thing that changes is not always the outside world. Perhaps that person has not come back. That opportunity has not opened. The answer you have been waiting for still has not arrived. But inside you, a quiet shift has already begun. The energy once trapped in controlling, proving, waiting and fearing slowly returns to its true owner. You no longer live as if your worth is in someone else's hands. You no longer turn outer silence into a sentence against your soul. You begin to understand that what Jung called the journey back to the self is not a distant theory, but the moment you stop abandoning yourself in exchange for something that may not truly belong to you. Vibrational detachment at its deepest level is not coldness, not pretending not to need, and not leaving everything to fate. It is the state in which you still love, still desire, still act, but no longer allow desire to turn you into a beggar. You do your part with sincerity, then return to life the part that needs to unfold on its own. You do not force the river, do not hold the door, do not distort yourself to fit into a place that is too small. When the persona loosens its control, the shadow is seen, and the self begins to guide. You do not become more perfect. You become more real. And it is that truth that becomes the place where your deepest magnetism begins. So if there is one thing to carry with you after this video, let it be this gentle reminder. What is truly meant for you will not need you to betray yourself in order to keep it. Live one rhythm slower, listen a little more deeply, and return to the part of you that has never lost its value, whether the world responds or not. If this video touched you, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who is tired of chasing something that makes them forget themselves. Perhaps this is exactly the reminder they need to hear today. When you stop chasing from fear, life does not close. It only begins to recognize you in your most truthful form.